Okay, so in the first video, we talked about how we got each of those coordinates in the unit circle, and now we are going to explore a little bit more about this unit circle on problem number 3. Use the diagram above to give exact values for the following trigonometric functions. Sine pi over 6. Okay, so this might seem a little weird, like how could I ever find just the sine of something weird like pi over 6? Well, when I see pi over 6, I know that it's being presented to me in radian measure. So if you remember with our radians, a full 360 counterclockwise is 2 pi. And the reason for that is 2 times pi times the radius, remember, which in the unit circle is 1. And that gives us all the way around is 2 pi. Meaning that half of that, or half of 360 is 180. What's half of 2 pi? Half of 2 pi is pi. And then, sorry, my baby's saying hi to me. Say hi to her too. There we go. You want to wave? Hello? Hello? She doesn't quite have the wave down yet. Oh, there we go. We got a little wave. She's walking now. Okay. Anyway, back to math. Where was I? Okay. Yes, 180 degrees is pi. So what's half of 180 degrees? Well, that'd be 90 degrees. What's half of pi? Half of pi is pi over 2. So that means each 90 degrees on the unit circle is worth pi over 2. Okay, so what would 3 90 degrees equal? Okay, so it'd be, what's pi over 2 plus pi over 2 plus pi over 2. Oh wow, she can open the screen door now. Hey, I think she can open this now. I'm making a video. She opened it right in the middle of the video. I just want to let you know so she doesn't do it again. Sorry about that. Okay, so each of these would add up to 3 pi over 2, which is 270 degrees. Right there. Okay, so now that we have that, all right, so now let's start thinking about what each one of these little ones would be. Well, I'm going to know 30 degrees from the last video. So I would have to take the 90-degree angle and divide it by 3. This is just one of many ways to do it. And if I were to divide that by 3, remember, division becomes multiplication. I do the reciprocal, and it gives me pi over 6. So each 30 degrees is pi over 6. So this one would be 2 pi, because I'd have to add those together, 2 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 3. Okay, so you can kind of think your way through it like that, or you can just like use the formula. So you'll notice I'm filling out this unit circle. I'm filling out this unit circle before I start answering the questions. So let's say I wanted to get this one right here, and I know that that right there is 120 degrees. So if I want to make 120 degrees into radians, I would multiply it by pi over 180. We learned that before, and that gives me 120 pi over 180, and then when I divide those by 60, I get 2 pi over 3. So this right here is 2 pi over 3. And then the same thing if you want to take it the other way. If I wanted to make 5 pi over 6 into degrees, I would multiply it by 180 over pi, and when you do that you get actually 150 degrees, which would be one more. So this would be 5 pi over 6. So you might pause the video, see if you can get the rest of them on your own, and then I'll start filling them in. Okay, so we know the full 180 is here, so our next one is going to be 7 pi over 6, and then 4 pi over 3, and then our next one is 3 pi over 2, but I'm going to write it on the side just so it's clear. And then right here we have 5 pi over 3, and then we have 11 pi over 6. Okay. All right, now we get to actually answer the questions, okay? Okay, so for this one, use the diagram above to give exact values for the trigonometric expressions. Okay, so now we're getting to the real problem. So there's a sine of pi over 6. So remember that angle's pi over 6, right? And now this is going to tie together with our last video, okay, where we knew that the distance, the x value here is the square, what was it? Do you remember? It's this, the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so the square root of 3 over 2. And we knew that this side here was 1/2. And we knew that the hypotenuse is 1. So the question is, what's sine of 30 degrees? Or what is sine of pi over 6? Well, sine is so, or opposite over hypotenuse. So you can see how in this case, the sine of pi over 6 is 1/2 over 1, which is just 1/2. So pi over 6, that's 1/2 because we did opposite over hypotenuse. Let's try 5 pi over 6. So that, remember, that goes to here, right? So I'm talking about this through here, and maybe just pause the video and see if you can get that one on your own. Well, now we're talking about this triangle where this is 1/2 and this is 1, and remember this is the square root of 3 over 2. So the sine of 5 pi over 6 is the opposite 1/2 over 1. So that again is 1/2. So I want to point something out here. Let me teach you a shortcut. When you're doing these, you don't have to do that much work as I did right there, actually. Because what you can remember is that when you're finding the sine of a radian measure, we know that the sine is equal to the y value. So sine is equal to y. Do you see that? How's the sine equal the y value? And over here, how the sine equaled the y value? So that is just a shortcut for all the ones that say sine down here. Okay, so sine for pi over 3. Well, where's pi over 3? Here's pi over 3. I go up here, I look at this, and ask, what's the y value of that green dot? Well, the y value of that green dot is the square root of 3 over 2. And let's just do the other signs while we're here. So let's do this one. Maybe try it on your own. Sine 3 pi over 2. So sine 3 pi over 2 is this one, right? Okay, and what is my y value? It's a -1. And then finally we have the sine of 7 pi over 3. This one's a little challenging, so maybe pause the video and try it on your own. 7 pi over 3 is not directly labeled on our unit circle. 7 pi over 3 is more than 2 pi, which means it's more than 360 degrees. So if I were to make 7 over 6 like a mixed number, what would I have? I would have 2 and a 1/6. So this 2 represents the entire circle. And then just that last 1/6 pi is this angle right here. Okay? So that's actually what we're finding. Okay? I know that 7 pi over 6 is this whole thing, but we're just finding this reference angle right there. Okay, and what's its y value? It is 1/2. Okay, now we got, wait, no. Sorry, I'm not going to redo the whole video, but hopefully you caught the mistake. 7 pi over 6. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to back up to the mixed number. Okay, 7 over 3 is not 2 and a 1/6. What is it? It's 2 and a 1/3. So we're talking about this angle here, because this is the 1/3. So we're finding the y value of that angle, which is this. So it's not 1/2, it is the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, very good. Now we got to get to the cosine ones, okay? So our first one up is the cosine of 7 pi over 6. So where is 7 pi over 6 on our circle? It is right here, and we're talking about this reference angle here. So we're talking about this triangle that goes through here. And remember, now we're doing cosine. So cosine is ca, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. What is my adjacent right here? My adjacent was from problem 2. the negative square root of 3 over 2. And what's the hypotenuse? 1. So what's the adjacent over the hypotenuse? It would be the negative square root of 3 over 2 over, or divided by, 1, which is just the negative square root of 3 over 2. And there's a shortcut for this one too that maybe you remember or maybe you've picked up on. So if I'm talking about this angle here, and I know that the cosine answer was the negative square root of 3 over 2, do you see how that matches the x value? So the cosine is equal to the x value. So now we can take shortcuts with those. So we're talking now about, what's the next cosine one? Pi over 6? Maybe try it on your own, knowing that it's equal to the x value. What is the x value of pi over 6? It is the square root of 3 over 2. What's the cosine of 11 pi over 6? Okay, here's 11 pi over 6. What's its x value? It is the square root of 3 over 2. Uh-oh. Okay, my pencil died right in the middle of it, okay? But I think this is the last problem, isn't it? Oh, nope, there's one more. Okay, so I'm going to let it charge up, and I will just go ahead and say out loud what the answers to the rest of them are. So for f, when you found the cosine of 11 pi over 6, it was the square root of 3 over 2. And the cosine of pi, the x value was negative 1. Okay, so that finishes up those two. All right, so that got us through problem number 3. And since I have to charge my iPencil, maybe I'll have to make a third video, which I was hoping not to have to do. But yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and do it that way.